This is a rose called Chevy Chase. And between about the middle of June and right up to a week or so ago, it was flowering gloriously. It's smothered with small cherry red flowers, multi-petaled, and they last for ages. But now they've done their stuff. So I am deadheading it to tidy it up. And by the way, when you're deadheading, you actually need to cut back to something, to the first point where there are no spent flowers coming from it, which means that in a rose like this, it means taking off quite a lot. If you do that when it's flowering, that will promote more flowers. However, this is part of the long-term pruning process, because this is a rambler, and ramblers are different to climbers. Climbers produce their flowers on new growth, but ramblers do the exact opposite. They flower on old growth. So the new shoots, and this is a really good example, doesn't bear flowers. And you can see these great arching new shoots, and there are some up in the sky without any flowers on at all. But if I leave them, next year, they will have flowers. So that really dictates how you prune it. So what I'm going to do is deadhead it so it looks better, and then this sort of thing, I will wrap it round the support in a sort of crisscross way. And that way you have a good structure of new growth, nice flexible shoots that hopefully next year will be covered in flower. Now, coming up on today's programme, Joe explores a distinctive allotment site in Nottingham, which has been restored into a beautiful and productive oasis.
Wow. Your plot is, I love it. The wild backdrop, you've got a pond.
The pond actually is a legacy from my mum, and it's just created this really beautiful, tranquil space.
We meet a landscape architect in Sheffield whose love of plants has transformed his life and his home.
I like to grow anywhere and everywhere. I think from my childhood I love growing plants. So I've really followed my passion and I'm so proud about it.
As Carol's garden moves into late summer, she creates an inspirational new planting plan using the season's colours.
Again, you've got that orange and blue, that real zinginess from there. I love it.
And we visit a designer in Keighley, near Bradford, the 2025 UK City of Culture, whose garden is as edible as it is beautiful.
There are some of the most beautiful plants that are also edible, and you can combine them in ways that look absolutely stunning.
I'm doing a little bit of cutting back here in the cottage garden because however carefully you plan it, there will come a point when the flowers that perform best in high summer have done their stuff. They've got nothing more to give. And so they are dying back. Now, some plants die back very gracefully and beautifully, and you want to keep them. Their seed heads are lovely, they're great for wildlife, their foliage looks good. But quite a few don't. Quite a few just look brown and sort of washed up in the border, and that detracts from the display in late summer. So what I like to do is to go around and cut them back. I mean, so things like this agastache, which is lovely and is perfectly healthy, if I cut that back now, that's doing no harm. The roots will be fine. It'll come back next year and do its stuff. But it does leave a little bit of space, and you don't really want too much bare soil this time of year. But if you go and shop around, you're bound to find some annuals for sale with the right sort of colour that you want for the garden that you can just pop in to fill gaps. And if you're prepared, you can sow your own annuals. If you sow them in spring, and they will grow on, and I've got some Nicotiana sylvestris precisely for that purpose, that will perform at their best from now through till autumn. Of course, the ground is hard and dry, but we've had some rain, so not too bad. Now, this is a Nicotiana sylvestris, tobacco plant, really tall, with lovely sort of white flower, with really intoxicating, musky scent. It's one of those plants that is designed to release its fragrance at night, attracting moths as pollinators. And I put this on the corner because it will grow really quite tall. It's late-ish in the year to be planting out, so probably will only reach about 4 foot. But if you plant these in July, beginning of July, they can reach 6 foot tall. Really statuesque plants. But as I get in under the rows, I need something that is a little bit smaller. I also want to pick up some of the pinks that we've got in the garden. So I've got these cosmos. They're not specifically named, they're just a mix, but I like the pink, and they will not grow so tall. These will stay about 2 to 3 foot, so therefore can go a little bit closer underneath the rows. And having cut back, I've got the space to do this. That goes in there like that. This one can go here. Plants like the cosmos will respond to warmth. So as long as it stays above about 5 degrees, they will go on flowering. And keep deadheading them. That will encourage more flowers. And I've known cosmos flowering here in a sheltered place at Christmas time. So that's really good long-term autumn colours. Now, Joe has been to Nottingham to visit an allotment. Well, so far so ordinary. There are lots of allotments all over the country, except that this particular allotment site is not ordinary at all.
2 miles from Nottingham city centre lies a hidden slice of horticultural history. Victorian-era allotments known as Bagthorpe Gardens. These allotments are nearly 200 years old, and if you didn't know where they were, you wouldn't have a clue how to find them. I've been told to look for a gate. I think it's up here. Or scrambling up. Tucked away behind these rows of houses are around 6 acres of Grade 2 listed gardening heritage. Ooh. Oh yeah. Yeah, we're in allotment territory. Of which 37 of the original 65 plots remain. It's not like a normal allotment, I've got to say. There's sort of gates and rooms and sections and beautiful hedges though, fantastic for wildlife. Wow, lovely, colourful, live honeybees. All this may have easily been lost if it wasn't for a charity called the Bagthorpe Gardeners, set up 28 years ago by founder Paul Saxton. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Joe.
This place is amazing.
It's pretty good.
It's enormous, I got lost.
It's pretty good.
I've seen a lot of allotments in my time,
Yeah.
I've got to say, but this place is special. What's the history of it?
It's all to do with the Industrial Revolution. You know, most people before the Industrial Revolution lived in the countryside, but things were changing rapidly. The Enclosure Acts happened that people couldn't use the common land anymore. And then new mills were opening with new machinery. So the whole way of life changed. People had to move into the mill towns. They came into very substandard houses, you know, back-to-back houses, poor sanitation. Then there was a big trade slump, 1830s into the 1840s, known as the Hungry 40s.
The newly formed Labourers' Friends Society had workers' welfare at their heart, and their leader wanted to tackle food poverty with allotments.
He had an idea of 1/4 of an acre per plot with a little hut.
I mean, 1/4 of an acre, you can grow a lot of food on that for the family.
That definitely, yeah. I mean, it was intended to see a family through a shortage of work and wages for about 13 weeks of a year, plus the fact that the state of, you know, where people were living was terrible.
Sort of
There was
slums.
back-to-back houses. So to get a place to come like this was the vision. You could grow your own food, you could be independent, and you'd have a higher moral sense, really.
So any idea of what they would have been growing here back then?
I mean, this is quite sandy ground here. Basically, I think it was root crops. You know, things like carrots and lots of things that we'd be growing today, I think, would be similar. Parsnips, you know, cabbages, all the basics, I think, they would be growing.
And it seems the vision for people to independently grow their food has lasted to this day. Hello, Anne. Nice to meet you. Oh, you've got a nice bounty.
Yeah, I like to grow what I eat, as it were.
Okay.
I don't grow unusual things. I just grow what I can cook.
How long have you had the plot here?
20 years.
20 years. And it's an amazing site, isn't it?
Fabulous.
It's really a special
Fabulous.
place, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great.
What does it mean to you?
Well, it's such a good community here. Lots of lovely birds, particularly robins, who follow you around as you're gardening and digging, and you'll turn around and there's a robin about 1 foot away from you. Yeah. So that's really, really nice.
But it wasn't plain sailing for these garden allotments. After nearly 150 years of use, they fell into neglect, becoming completely unusable. Until 1997, when Paul came to the rescue. So, Paul, how did you get involved in the first place?
I used to be a paint and decorator at one time, and I had a young family, 2 girls, and I wasn't really that interested in gardening at all. And once one of my customers asked me if I could dig potatoes up, it was just an amazing experience, really. It was like switched on a light in my brain, really. And so I thought, I've got to have an allotment.
An opportunity arose for Paul to buy a house adjoining these derelict allotment gardens, and what he saw propelled him into action.
When I got inside the gardens, I realised how many of them were totally abandoned, literally wastelands. And I thought it was just wrong. And then that's how we formed the Bagthorpe Gardeners Group.
The charity set about restoring plots that were almost lost to land developers a decade earlier.
There was about 36, 37 plots on here now. Got over 100 members. It's a breakaway, you know, from their everyday lives. It's an oasis, really.
One of the distinguishing features people have cherished here are the garden outhouses, lovingly known as bothies. Roger, I have got bothy envy. I've got to say, your bothy is just beautiful.
Well, what's interesting is when I first came here, I saw it as a ruin which was covered in creepers. It was clearly one of the historic buildings, and I was very fortunate to have a friend who was a retired builder. We were able to turn it into what we have today.
So most plots have a bothy?
Because people had a very large plot, they would come to the bothy to stay over the weekend.
What would have been in these bothies originally, do you know?
There might have been a bed, and it wouldn't have been very sophisticated. Definitely around the fire, you know, they'd made a cup of tea.
And a few tools and things like that.
Lots of, tools are in there. And I think overall that would have been a valuable function for making this a place that you could spend the whole day working hard.
Yeah. And the hard work still continues. With such a big site, some plots are still being restored today. Hello, Val.
Hi, Joe. Welcome.
Wow. Your plot is, I love it. The wild backdrop. You've got a pond down there. Your blueberries are incredible.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
How long have you had it?
I've had it since January 2020.
Okay. What was it like when you first came here?
It was completely derelict. It took 3 months to just flatten everything to make space for some new beds.
So what are you growing? Are you trying anything new this year?
I'm growing cauliflowers, which are new to me. I'm quite a new grower.
Yeah.
So I'm growing cauliflowers for the first time.
But there's also quite a lot of ornamental action down the end and somewhere to sit. You've got a destination point, as a designer would say.
Yeah, the pond actually is a legacy from my mum, who passed away in December. And she loved to see videos and photos of the allotment. And it's just created this really beautiful, tranquil space, a lovely place for reflection and for remembering Mum. And, you know, it's definitely her legacy to this allotment.
Wow. Well, having spent some time here, you start to realise how special this place is. It's got a very strong atmosphere, and I think that's down to the history, the people, the work that they put into this place, and that emotional connection with their plots too. And just to think, we are right in the middle of a city here, and it's not just a haven for people, but for wildlife too. It's fabulous.
We're used to thinking of allotments as being these open sites growing mainly edible plants, but they were intended, or at least many of them were, as gardens for people that didn't have gardens, with lawns and trees and little houses, and they're disappearing. And it takes the passion and the commitment of individuals to reverse that and restore them and treasure them. What I'm doing here is planting out a series of rosemary bushes that I took as cuttings this time last year. And the great thing about rosemary is it thrives in poor soil with good drainage and full sun. And you can see this soil here is really powdery and thin and a stone underneath, and not much wants to grow on it, but the rosemary should be happy. You can see I'm planting this quite high. I'm not sinking it down, so it's not going to sit in water. There we go. And they will flower in late winter, these lovely pale blue flowers from February through to April. And then if you clip them immediately after they flower, they will hold their shape pretty well. Just because these are plants that love hot sunshine, poor soil and good drainage, it doesn't mean that they don't need any water. So I will water these in well, and if it doesn't rain, I should water them at least once a fortnight. I've got the same amount of cuttings which I'm going to put on the other side of the path, but before I do that, there are some sage cuttings that I want to take while I'm here. Having taken the sage, put them in a polythene bag because it means that you restrict the moisture loss. Now, with any cutting, you don't want anything like that amount of leaves because the leaves are all transpiring, they're losing moisture, and there are no roots to feed it back in. So the first thing to do is just pull the extra foliage off. And because it's a sage plant, I can use that in the kitchen. What I have here is perlite. Perlite does very well for cuttings. But you could also use grit. You can use any gritty mix of compost. You can take cuttings in pure sand. The point being is they don't need nutrition to form roots. They need water and they need air. And then push them into the corner. So that's one there. We've got a couple more that I can take. Take the leaves off. There are different types of sage, but they all work in the same way. And this time of year and to the beginning of October is absolutely the best time to take these semi-ripe cuttings. So this is new wood, but it's had a chance just to harden off a bit. And it's really the easiest type of cutting to take. I'm just going to cut that back a little bit below a node, like that, and push this into the other corner. And when you see new growth, you see new leaves form, you know there will be roots and they'll be ready to pot on. So the next stage is water it and put it somewhere that is sunny but not in bright sunlight. A west-facing windowsill is perfectly good. If you've got a greenhouse, just make sure it's slightly shaded. If you've got a propagator, that's great. But if you haven't, just simply put one of these bags over the top, close it up, and that will keep the moisture in. And it actually works incredibly well. And I would expect to have 2 new plants from that in about 3 to 4 weeks' time, then pot them on, and then grow them on for a year, and they'll be the size of the rosemary and be ready to plant out here this time next year. We're off to Sheffield now to meet Gokul Azarkan, who is a landscape architect and doesn't have his own garden, and yet that certainly hasn't stopped him gardening.
I'm originally from Tamil Nadu, south of India. I came here to do my master's and I'm working as a landscape architect. At the moment, I live in an apartment. I don't have a garden, but I have gardens. I like to grow anywhere and everywhere. This is my bedroom and I grow plants here as well. So I've got a little corner of a houseplants next to the east-facing window, and outside the window in the sill, I've started growing the bonsais. So I love to surround myself with the plants. It's sort of like a naturalistic feel to your room. People might think I'm so obsessed or crazy. So this is our lounge window. So I tend to group my plants because that's good for their health. They tend to make a microclimate in them by increasing their humidity. And I feel that kind of potentially make them to grow better. Over here, I got a mini hosta. So basically in UK, hostas are grown as outdoor plants, but I've made it as a nice indoor plant or house plant. This plant, I got it in a garden center for £1. This is called Oxalis Sunset. I've taken a propagation through cuttings and offered it to many people, and they all love this plant. It all started when my friend gifted me a small plant cutting from age of 5, and then my passion grew from there. Gardening was a coping mechanism for me. When I see plants, when I nurture them, and then it rewards back with the blooms and things, it's really rewarding and amazing. Me and my older brother are the first generation to go to school and university. My parents were not keen me growing plants because they thought I might get diverted in my career goals. But then eventually I educated them and they got to know there is a career with horticulture and landscaping design. As a landscape architect, I view these urban green spaces as a really important feature. These spaces help to purify air, they reduce the rise in temperature, and they also help in the drainage system, like rainwater runoff. Back in India, I don't really see these kind of spaces. I think there should be more of these spaces in India, especially where there's a flood-prone, more frequent of floods. Sheffield is really a place where one could indulge in nature. Over here, we got a patio space that I've made a good use of it as my container garden. So initially, I started this to grow plants that I use in my profession to kind of like experiment. So this is basically an experimental garden. In India, we love roses. I love the old rose varieties, but I also love to collect the unusual colored roses. The one that I've got here is kind of like a light lilac shade. And over here, I've got another unusual color rose. This is called hot chocolate rose. So I suggest everybody should have a little pond in their garden. It's so essential for the wildlife.
Hey, Gokul, how are you?
Hi, Dom.
All
You're
right?
good? Yeah, thank you.
Good.
Yeah, cool. Over here, I got a cool little funky plant. It's called Persicaria Purple Fantasy. And they are really cool plant to add in the shady gardens because they love shade. Cool, funky patterns on the leaves. This space downstairs used to be a space for storing bins and quite secluded area. So there was more antisocial behavior when I moved here. So I thought to add a lot of plants. Now it's no much of antisocial behavior now. Over here, I got a really nice black wall. And the thing I like about the black wall is like the plant that is against the black wall really pop out, boost the color of the plant. I've got a spotty photophyllum. Look at the color with the black walls, with these inflorescence and the white hairy stems kind of like pop out really well. Got the strawberry and the banana plant here that I got from the clearance sale for £1. I'm putting here. So you can see how the black wall kind of like make the plant really pop out. I love to propagate my own plants. Got a cutting of roses. This is my little greenhouse sort of thing. So basically a plastic container. So when you put the lid on, it acts like a mini greenhouse, capturing all the moisture inside, which is nice for all the cuttings to grow. So this is a rose cutting that I propagated last year. And now you can see the lovely growth on this 2 little cutting. And here I've got a little cutting of a salvia hot lips. It's just growing at the moment. You can see the little shoots coming up. I think from my childhood, I love growing plants. So it is something in my blood or gene. No matter you have a garden or a ground space, still you can just grow plants wherever you can. I've really followed my passion and I'm so proud about it.
I love the way that Gokul has been able to take his love of plants as a landscape architect from a big level, on a street, in a big garden, and yet bring it to the intimacy and the privacy of his room, of the backyard. And it shows you that actually gardens live within you as much as they do outside. And it's that connection between the two that matters. There's something that happens in that magic. Here in the Paradise Garden, it's become more than my idea, more than just the plants. It's become a place in its own right. And I often come here and sit and just look out on the world. And I deliberately tried around Longmeadow to create spots that are just good for stopping in, letting the garden exist around you, and not really thinking about anything at all, just being. And that can be powerful magic, and at times, powerful medicine. Very much into tomato season now, and it is important to keep harvesting them. It encourages more fruit to develop. This is a variety of tomato called Sun Gold, cherry tomato, and it's a particularly good one to grow for instant eating because it's very sweet, it's pretty reliable, you can grow it indoors or outdoors, and ripens to this distinctly orange rather than red color. And at this stage of the tomato season, a good tip is to start lifting the plant. And what that means is taking off the lower leaves. If you just take about 1/3 of the foliage off, then that's fine. And the reason for doing that is to let more air flow in. If you get ventilation, that helps with tomato blight, it helps with whitefly, and also means that more light can get on trusses, particularly low down on the plant, and they'll ripen better. These are a tomato called Black Krim, or Black Crimean, sometimes called Black Russian. And it looks sort of unripe. It's got a greeny, almost a brown, sort of chocolatey color. Absolutely delicious. One of my favorite tomatoes of all. have a bed of outdoor tomatoes, which you can see are way behind the indoor ones, but completely normal in terms of what you would expect from a British summer, and it's been a good summer. They will be ripening in September, which is normal for outdoor tomatoes. Now, this is a variety called Gardener's Delight, and it's a really good doer. If you've never grown tomatoes before, it's definitely the first one I would start with. They're robust, and they're heavy croppers too, and I always grow some. Now, it's time to pay another visit to Carol's garden, where she is celebrating and sharing the joys of her late summer borders.
Planting a bed or a border can seem a really daunting sort of prospect. I mean, which plants do you choose? Well, when I'm planting, first of all, I think about things that are going to go on right the way through the season. It's going to look good all year round. But then there are the shooting stars, those plants who only have a sort of ephemeral presence, and yet they lend a certain sort of pizzazz to any planting you've got. Throughout my garden, there are lots and lots of smaller gardens, separate spaces, which have their own kind of personality and their own kind of planting. This garden is predominantly white. It's absolutely glowing. This flat top aster here, with its sort of misty wistfulness, it just gives a sort of air of contentment and happiness. The first thing you come to when you look into this very special little corner is the cosmos. It's over the top, not physically, but in that it just overlooks everything, and it kind of sets the mood too. It's not just its beautiful big white flowers, but it's also its feathery foliage. And whenever you're thinking about putting plants together, I'm looking not just at the flower colour, but its shape, the whole form of the plant, its texture, the foliage, and it's accompanying this white phlox. And this has to be just about my favourite umbel of all time. I mean, I love cow parsley, all the rest of the family, but this is Selenum wallicianum. This is its moment, and yet it's been a beautiful plant right the way through from the spring. What I love about it is its flowers now in these great plateaued, tiny little florets, but also this filigree foliage. And in the spring, that foliage is even better. It's like great big green doilies spread across the ground. It's an absolute delight. I think the whole thing works together really quite well. Lots of it by accident, but lots of it is by design. Well, how about this for a complete contrast? Up there it was white and peaceful and quiet, but here it's alive, it's really, really zingy. And most of the effect is created by these two plants. This glorious crocosmia with the glowing orange flowers, and then below it and mingling with it, this big blue geranium. This is Geranium roseanne. It's been in flower since early summer, May, June, and it will go on flowering right the way through the season, simply because it doesn't set any seed. It's a sterile hybrid, so it's got no reason to stop flowering. It's worth its weight in gold in any planting. And look at the bees in here. They absolutely adore this crocosmia. I really think it works beautifully. What I want to do next is put some of these wonderful late summer flowering perennials together to make something truly exciting and hopefully inspirational. What I want to start with is some structure in here, and for that, I'm going to use this plant. This is an Actaea, and when these flowers are open, there'll be tall spires of white, beautifully scented. But for now, it's just the foliage I want to admire, and I want it to be a real centerpiece. I should explain that I'm planting up this great big trough, and it approximates to the sort of bed or border that any of us might have in our gardens. In here is some really, really good compost, absolutely ideal. Now, one of the plants that immediately springs to mind to combine with that Actaea is this lovely salvia. Now, I always want to call it Maradona, but it's called Caradonna. I think I've got it the right way around. This is a totally hardy salvia, and one of its enormous benefits, apart from the fact that the bees adore it, is that even when these flowers have finished, it leaves behind it these beautiful dark bracts, which I think are going to tone perfectly with the Actaea. Now, this is a Helenium. I usually like big, tall Heleniums, but in this planting, this short variety is absolutely ideal. I love purple and orange together. There's something about it. It's really, really good. And if you look at the middle of these, I always think they're like sort of bronze doorknobs, the centre of Heleniums. And they, of course, pick up the colour of the leaves here and the bracts in the salvia. Isn't it lovely? It was meant to be, wasn't it? Let's get a bit of movement into the whole thing. It's just wonderful to see these lovely, soft, wafty things. This is a beautiful Pennisetum. I think it's a total delight. Now, I've got my stalwart Selenum that we've seen down the garden. It's absolutely lovely. And look at that fine foliage. And how about this? This is an accident. This lovely purple stem just picks up on the leaves of the Actaea. Look at that. And then, when you mix in this Astrantia, which is one of my all-time favourites, I think one of the reasons I love this is that colour is so subtle, a mixture of pink and white and green. But if I were to put something like this with it, rather than looking subtle now, it just looks dingy. It's definitely a no-no. And I think the same goes for this. Not as bad, but still a bit much. But I know where this is going to go. Down this end, I've got different plants. The Kniphofia is ideal here, I think, and it picks up the orange from the Helenium. But look at it with the centre of this dahlia. Just bring this dahlia head down and put it next door to the Kniphofia. Look at the similarity between those oranges. It's just right, isn't it? But the reason I want this here is I've used this geranium. This is Roseanne, the same one that we saw down the garden. This time, instead of being with a crocosmia, with a Kniphofia. So again, you've got that orange and blue, that real zinginess from there. And it's a low plant, this, and it's also a scrambler. Got this sort of river that runs right through. I love it, I love it. You know what? I'm really pleased with it. I mean, I'm not pleased with myself, it's the plants that do it. All those elements that I was talking about before, we've got real stalwarts here. We've got things that lend a bit of ephemerality. We've got real structure and things that are going to go on looking good for ages and ages. Right now, I'm just going to enjoy late summer.
Well, I think the great thing about late summer is it's getting later. And so not all of us can have such wonderful plants as Carol, but there is a chance for all of us to enjoy summer stretching out nowadays well into October. It's been a really good year for figs, and they ripen almost overnight. And when they do, the birds love them. Look at that. That looked perfect. You reach up, turn it round, and the birds have been at them. So this is something that I'm now harvesting every single day. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that this one tree has given us over 100 figs, all of them delicious. It's very much a figgy year. And to grow good figs, you don't need a lot of space. You don't even need a garden, because they grow really well in a pot. Now's a really good time to plant a fig, and they're easy to grow. And if you plant one now, you could have a decent-sized fig tree in 5 years' time. And they grow very happily in a pot. I've got one here, which I'm going to pot up. This is a brown turkey. And if you want a regular supply of figs, I would advise getting brown turkey. So you need to get yourself some decent compost. What I have here is basic peat-free bark-based compost. That is sieved garden compost. And then this is horticultural grit. Because the one thing they do need is drainage. So whether it's grit or even sand, you will need to add drainage to whatever compost you use. In order to give it goodness, I'm going to add the garden compost to the potting compost and just mix that in a little bit. And the grit, I'm going to add all of this. That, and then mix this up thoroughly. I'm using a recycled plastic pot, but it doesn't want to be at this stage any bigger than this. I may well, when the roots are filling this, pot this on into a really nice terracotta pot, but that's a few years down the line. We'll put a decent layer of compost in the bottom. Yeah, that's about right. Now, if I take it out, you can see that there's a good root system, and it's a little bit root bound at the bottom. Nothing to worry about at all. In this case, don't try and untangle roots. Just simply, gently break them. And the reason you do that is because that will stimulate the roots to grow new roots from the broken point, and they will grow out into the soil rather than round and round at the base of the plant. Right. Hold that in place. And fill around it. Just firm it down lightly. Now, that's all you need to do, except for a regular water. This will need watering once a week. However, if you go away and for any reason can't water it for 2, 3, or even 4 weeks, it will survive. So it does make it the ideal plant to grow in our increasingly hot, dry summers, whether you do so on a balcony, outside a back door. But wherever you put it somewhere sunny, because that's what's going to ripen the fruits. Now, just to be clear about the fruits, they can bear 3 crops at once and never less than 2. If a fig is going to be ripe, it will be full-sized by now, and then will ripen over the next month or 2. If it is half-sized, like these here, they're not going to grow sufficiently in order to ripen before the weather changes. These are geared to ripen round about the new year. And if you live in the central Spain or Greece or south of France, they'll be delicious. But unfortunately, our weather is not like theirs, so they'll be no good. And these are the ones that stay on over winter, turn brown, and eventually fall off. However, there is another crop emerging. Now, you can see here a tiny little fig. And you go into winter and they're pea-sized. That is giving you next year's harvest. We're going up to Yorkshire now, just outside Bradford, which, by the way, is this year's UK City of Culture, to Keighley, where Pippa Chapman has a permaculture garden.
Hi, I'm Pippa and welcome to my permaculture garden. Permaculture is very much about gardening in tune with nature. Food forests and forest gardening is very much a specific technique within that. So it's about growing multiple layers. It's about designing a kind of intentional, edible ecosystem that's very wild, but the plants are very carefully selected and it's managed in a way that really takes into account biodiversity and trying to help wildlife to thrive within your food growing space. I think when people think about sort of permaculture gardens and food forests, they quite often think it has to be messy and totally wild. It's about looking at how sort of nature grows and creating communities of plants that are all growing together and all the plants are useful in some way. So it's different from a herbaceous border in that when you're doing a purely ornamental garden, you're just thinking about how things look. We're wanting to think about how we're going to use those plants, what are their function within the ecosystem. So some plants are great for pollinators to bring in insects for natural pest management. Some plants are great at covering the ground to prevent weeds from coming up. And many of the plants are edible as well, so they're providing food for us. I mean, it's hugely satisfying to be able to grow your own food, just to know that you know exactly what's gone into the soil, exactly how that plant's been treated, to know that it's grown just, you know, a few metres from your kitchen. There's a large canopy layer in food forest, but in a small garden, obviously we can't fit in a giant tree. So we look at smaller trees like this is a plum tree here. It's about maximising that vertical space. And then under that, some of the herbaceous layers in. And you can see here these Welsh onions have this ajuga around the base, which is acting as a really effective ground cover. I think one of the most important things when trying to garden with nature and attract wildlife into your garden is just not being too tidy. The more that we sort of leave things and the more relaxed we become, the more that we leave space and habitat for the wildlife to come in. This pile here was not meant to be here. This was a temporary pile of garden branches and brash that we piled here. But when we actually started to clear it away, we were suddenly met by a swarm of bees, bumblebees, and realised that they'd made a nest in here. It made us realise how important the piles of brash are like this to have in the garden. Food forest is a really low maintenance way to grow food, but it's not a zero maintenance way to grow food. It's not as high maintenance as annual beds where you're constantly weeding and watering because those plants really don't like competition. But the maintenance in a food forest is more about stopping plants from out-competing each other. But the great thing is, like, say my kale is getting too big and it's swamping out my blackcurrant, the leaves that I'm cutting off the kale to reduce its size, I can then eat those for tea. So it's this idea of harvest as maintenance is a really great way to think about it. Particularly in a small-scale garden, it's in your own garden. You want it to look really beautiful, and there's absolutely no reason why you have to compromise on that in order to have a food forest. There are some of the most beautiful plants that are also edible, perennial vegetables, and you can combine them in ways that look absolutely stunning. People seek us out because we feel as strongly and passionately as they do about permaculture and ecological gardening. For about 7 years now, I've been developing this garden, designing it and managing it. And there's you know, many businesses and organisations and private clients that we've worked for over the years in the Bradford district who have all embraced this way of growing. And I think the more that I've been able to show them how beautiful and alive it can be, the more people have been convinced and asked for this kind of garden.
The challenging thing about permaculture for a conventional gardener like myself is this mixing in of edible and decorative plants side by side in a border. It looks great, it can taste wonderful, but it's still quite a leap for someone like me who's always had a vegetable garden or a decorative garden, but really inspiring. Now, some big changes here at the end of the writing garden. You can see that what we have here are the footings for a new building. There was the writing shed there, but that had got very rotten and needed replacing anyway. And the reason for this goes back to RHS Chelsea. If you remember, I did a dog garden there. And all the dog garden was relocated to Bastic Dogs and Cats Home. And they've taken an awful lot of it, but they said very early on they didn't want the building. And I thought about this. So I'm paying for it to be put up in Longmeadow as a memorial to that mad, weird and wonderful time when I got talked into doing a Chelsea garden, and I promise you, the only Chelsea garden I will ever do. And we'll use it as a garden glorified potting shed for years to come. The reason why I'm fondling the leaves of these pelargoniums is because they are all scented leaf pelargoniums. And some of them have lovely flowers, like Sidoides here has the most exquisite, tiny but intense flower. But all of them have a particular scent and fragrance. Now, I bought this collection at Gardeners World Live. They were healthy but small plants. I potted them up into terracotta pots, which is a good idea for pelargoniums because they breathe a little bit more. I haven't fed them at all. And as a rule, pelargoniums do not need overwatering. Certainly during the summer, they cope very well if they're watered, say, once a week, and in winter, not watered at all. I'm really happy they're here. These seem really healthy. Now, I tend to bring my aeoniums indoors around about October time. They're much better outside from about May through till September because to give them some fresh air, some light, a little bit of rain doesn't hurt them at all. I brought one in here to show you. Now you can take cuttings, if you get a nice straight stem, so if I take that like that, you can see that it's very green. Now we want that green to go. So simply leave it on the side, and I'll leave it in here like that for 10 days, 2 weeks, until that green has disappeared and you have this kind of grey callus, and that will stop it rotting as the roots form. Now, these are a number of cuttings that I took about a month ago. Sometimes aeoniums can take 3 months to root. So this is early days, but let's just check them to see, because if they have got roots, they can be potted on. Tangled up in amongst the perlite are fresh roots growing, and that means I can pot them on. Mix the perlite that they were in into some ordinary peat-free compost, so it's really well drained. That's important. The one thing that will destroy any succulent is being too wet. And I'm burying the stem, nothing else to give it a bit of stability. And I will dress that with grit. Keep it in a greenhouse until next May, and by which time the roots will have grown out, secured in the pot, and it will grow. Okay, that's enough of watching me working. Here's some jobs for you this weekend. Now is a good time to sow greens for an autumn and winter harvest, and they give a deliciously spicy choice of leaves, both eaten raw and cooked. Sprinkle the seed thinly on a peat-free compost, cover them over lightly, water them, and put them somewhere warm to germinate. They'll need pricking out, and then they can be planted out into their final position in about 6 weeks' time. It's a really good idea to mulch your tomatoes at this time of year. There's lots of things you can use, but I find that simply raw comfrey leaves do the job very well. Whatever you decide to use, water your tomatoes first. Cut the comfrey leaves and then just spread them around each plant. As well as reducing the loss of moisture from the soil, they very quickly decompose and feed goodness into the soil and therefore into the plant. If you grow lavender either as bushes or as a hedge, the chances are it will have finished flowering by now and it needs cutting back. Although, if you live in a very cold part of the country, you might consider leaving it over winter to add an extra layer of protection and then cutting it back in spring. But for most of us, if you clip it back now, removing all the spent flower heads and stems, it will look sharper and smarter all winter long. Sometimes we can get so involved in the process of gardening and other jobs we have to do and the hard work and forget what it's for. We grow flowers for our delight. We create spaces that make us feel better as people. And we grow food to eat. And the first rule is, I would say, never grow anything that you don't love to eat. So I've chopped the tomatoes that I just picked, completely fresh. A little bit of elephant garlic that I harvested a few weeks ago. Don't de-skin tomatoes. You lose a lot of their flavor. The only point in doing that is if you buy supermarket ones with very thick skins, you may want to. And I've added butter, a bit of olive oil. And the whole point of this is to get the freshness of the tomatoes from your garden and make it into a sauce. And you have the taste of summer. I've got some thyme here that I can just sprinkle that on, and that is ready. It's really simple, this. It takes 10 minutes to cook, 2 or 3 minutes to prepare. But what that has is an incredible freshness from your tomatoes, from your garden. And trust me, that is what gardening is all about. Well, that's it for today. You're with Adam next week in his garden, and I'll see you back here at Longmeadow in a couple of weeks' time. So until then, bye-bye.